I'd like to welcome you to the school board meeting for Monday, January 22nd. You can all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do have a sign-up sheet in the back of the room as you enter the doors on the right-hand side if you'd like to make any comments at the end of our school board meeting. Now I'd like to actually convene, before we get on our regular school board agenda, I'd like to convene our Board of Finance meeting for 2018.
At this point, Mr. President, I'd like to nominate Don Boxell as President of the Board of Finance.
Second?
We have a motion, and we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Also, at this point, I'd like to nominate as Secretary Cindy Sues for the Board of Finance.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And then I'd like to turn it over to Rob James.
Thank you, Mr. Baxel. The first item after the election of officers is to review the investments for the prior calendar year of 2017. As you know, because of liquidity and cash flow, we don't do any formal investments at this time of CDs. We have a money market account with our bank that sweeps every night to get a higher interest rate. As you can see in your board packet, in 2015, we earned a little over $18,000 of interest. In 2016, that was up to $38,700 worth of interest. And this past year, in 2017, we were at $55,626.50. Mainly because interest rate, as simple as interest rates have increased, nationwide with the feds and so forth. So we're glad that our banks have passed down those interest rates onto us as people in the savings accounts as well. So that is our investment activity for the year. So, any questions? All right. The next item is to seek your approval on our annual investment policy resolution. This is a resolution we do each year at this Board of Finance meeting, and this resolution outlines the types of investments we are legally obligated or legally allowed to do. These come straight out of Indiana code. And then it also states that we will continue our banking with Sensier Bank and People's Bank here for 2018. We've had great service with both banks, so that's our recommendation. So I seek your approval on that resolution.
Move to approve?
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
And we have a second. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. And my last item is to seek your approval to remove the old outstanding checks that we have outstanding from our bank account. These would be all checks that were written in calendar year 2015 and are still outstanding. We actually only have 4 for a total of $294.30. So I seek your approval to remove those outstanding checks. And in essence, those checks will be, that money will be receipted back into the fund in which they were originally drawn upon. So.
Move to approve.
Second?
We have a motion. We have a second. Any comments?
I just had a quick question. Wasn't there one on here for Purdue University?
Purdue University Calumet, yep.
I was surprised at that.
I did too, when I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was for a workshop or seminar or something that we sent people to, but
Okay.
they've chosen not to cash up checks. And if anyone would come later and show that maybe they lost a check or they found something, we would reissue a check to them accordingly, so.
Within 7 years, right?
Within 7 years.
Within 7 years.
We're already 2 years plus into the clock.
Okay. We'll take a vote on this. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, that's all I have for the Board of Finance meeting.
Move for adjournment.
We have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
And we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned from our Board of Finance meeting. So we'll jump right back into our regular school board meeting and reconvene. We'll go on to our agenda, approval, deletions, additions. Dr. Bracco.
Thank you, Mr. Baxo. We do have 2 revisions to the original board agenda, and that is a typo from my Roman numerals 8A3 and Mr. Gandolfi's 8B1 personnel recommendations, and those should be at your workstations, both of those revisions.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And we you have a second? Any comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now we're moving on to correspondence. Is there any correspondence, Mrs.?
None at this time?
All right, thank you. Move on to our liaison committee updates. Mr. Marshall.
Yes, we have our next management, board meeting for Westlake scheduled for this Wednesday at 4 o'clock here at LC. And there's nothing to report on personnel interview.
All right, thank you. Dr. Malcolm.
Legislative committee report Wednesday is an event at Maryville High School, backpack full of cash, which might be very interesting if you can attend that. And additionally, I see Dr. Rocco has some other items down here, so he will add to that. I did receive an email today from Indianapolis that there's a new House Bill 1398 that is called the Coalition of School Corporations, and it allows a group of school corporations to band together with private schools to apply to the State Board of Ed to become a coalition of continuous improvement school districts, and provides that certain statutes or rules may be suspended for a coalition member. That includes curriculum, it says on here. And so, Vic is asking us to reach out because it can go really deep, as you know, right now. His concern is more about the citizenship component of it. But it says that understanding the operation of the following is suspended for a coalition school. Item 1C concerning curriculum. Not healthy. Did you get that today?
I did not see that yet.
I will forward this to all of you, and if anyone out there would like a copy, let me know. Okay, that's all.
There are flyers, by the way, for Backpack Full of Cash over on the table.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. And Lake Central Education Foundation has released another money for another round of grants, and so we look forward to seeing those grant applications coming in. And as you know, that's a great opportunity to get some enriching opportunities going on in our classroom. Additionally, Lake Central Education Foundation worked and volunteered with the high school's Science Olympiad Invitational that they had Saturday. And it was a really nice event, very well organized by Mr. Grundelach from Bibbage School. Well, he's now in high school, but I always have to say if I know him from Bibbage School, but he did a nice job. And I know Dr. Rocker, you were there for a bit in the morning, and I'm not sure if anybody else was able to attend. I know Mr. Begley was there to help with the awards, Mrs. Talent, of course, Mary Jo Martin. So we had a good event, And the third one would be the wellness, and Sandy and I, neither one could attend that last wellness meeting, but I want to let all of you know on the school board that we have activities that will be starting in February. Wellness activities that we can compete against maybe our central office administrators, huh?
Perhaps. Compete against yourself. I think this is an individual.
Oh, it's just individual. All right, darn, I was hoping for the other, but that's okay. All right, any questions on any of that? Okay, thank you.
All right, Ms. Lesson, do you have anything?
Nothing new with Sherville redevelopment.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Suze?
The St. John redevelopment, there's a meeting this Thursday. And then Dollars for Scholars, they're doing Penny Wars, and this week is Watson, Protzman, and Coling. The next week will be Holman, Piper, Clark, Grimmer, and Kingler. For your pennies.
Great, thank you. And Dyer Parks Department, nothing to cover there. The Dyer redevelopment committee meeting, every time I go to that meeting, it seems like all they do is talk about the fence. On Calumet Avenue, so they're still waiting on their supplier. They're having problems with their supplier still.
It's a long
So
process.
it could be a very long process
Absolutely,
over there. I feel sorry, I feel for them.
yeah.
Moving on to our official school board business topics, consent agenda, Dr. Bronco.
Yeah, seek board approval from the minutes from the January 8th special meeting and then the board meeting, and then approval of claims and payroll as you received.
So moved.
Oh, we have a motion, Dr. Malcolm, we have a second. We have a second, Mr. Marshall. All right, any comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now we will ask for any public comments regarding those action items. Hearing none, we will move
Whoa,
on.
whoa, whoa, she has a sheet.
Oh, you do have some. Okay. Our first is Rana Resnick. If you'd like to stand, or if you'd like to come up here at the podium, and
Once we get you on camera.
so we get you on camera. We have to have proof that you were here.
Can you try to get your attention down here?
Oh, thank you, Janice. They were actually reversed. John was, Dr. DeVries was first. then
Oh.
Sorry.
Dr. DeVries?
Ms. Russell?
John's still a gentleman.
Hi, I just wanted to, voice my favor for the referendum. I think it's a great thing. I know there's probably gonna be some opposition, but I would much rather do this, pay, a little bit more every year than see bigger class sizes and less resources for my children. So, I'm here to help you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. All right, sorry about that, Dr. DeVries.
Yeah, I also am in favor of the referendum issue. Rob, if you can help me out here, I did some calculating today.
Okay?
And the old story about figures don't lie, but liars do figure. So you can check me out on this. Okay, I got some information from Dr. Rocco today that our starting salary for a first-year teacher is $41,000. Out of that, he, as a single person, is expected to pay $800 a year of that $41,000 for his health insurance. If, on the other hand, he or she has made the mistake of having a family, it's now up to $9,000 for that health insurance. So that individual is now down to $32,000. And my calculations came out to, I think it was about $28 an hour earning for that period of time. That's for the 41,000, not the 32. Okay. Also, we have to consider what is the cost of that person's education. Four-year college, conservative figure $25,000 a year. $100,000 invested in tuition, housing, books, etc. Also, I think you have to calculate what that person didn't earn those 4 years. Even at a minimum wage job, let's say a $15 an hour, my calculation comes out to a $30,000 a year job. So what's the advantage of that person going to college and becoming a teacher? Not a whole heck of a lot. Also, you have to calculate how much debt that student incurred during those 4 years of college. Now suppose they want to go to a bank and get a mortgage. They're going to be laughed at, carrying college debt and that kind of salary. Is it any wonder why people are not going into education? The really discouraging thing is, if you were to ask, I would say the majority of our teachers in our system, if they wanted their children to become teachers, majority are going to give you a nice quick no. So the question is, where are we going to be getting teachers in the next few years? We're stuck with a state that thinks public education is a failure. Therefore, they came to everybody's aid with charter schools and vouchers. We're going to correct this thing. Well, funniest thing, their charter schools are not doing any bit better than the public schools, and in many cases, not even keeping up with the public schools. The vouchers going to public or private schools, they like to champion the idea that their scores are so much better than the public schools. But what they're not telling you is they don't serve every student that knocks on their door. If you don't meet their standards, or if you need special help, special needs, it's not available there. But yet they say they're better because their scores are higher. not an equal playing field. The present situation with Lake Central, we are losing teachers to other schools. And probably teachers that are just getting out of teaching because they simply don't see a future in it. Now, we're not gonna see any big money coming from the state. They're more intent on charter schools and all that sort of thing. So I think it's absolutely in this district's interest to pass this referendum so that we can retain and recruit quality teachers to continue a quality education for our residents' children. There may be extra programs that we want to get into, but I think the bottom line is we've got to be competitive with wages if we're going to have quality education here. And again, please strongly consider this referendum. I hope everybody works for it, and especially those who are going to benefit the most from it, and that would be the teaching staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to our official school board business topics, our regular agenda for today. Dr. Rocco.
Okay, so I have, first on my list, a couple of professional leave requests. The first one is for Mr. Gandolfi and myself to attend the Indiana Association of Superintendents Winter Meeting. The topic is mainly collective bargaining. It does have to do with teacher contracts. Probably the most interesting topic on there is flexibility and contract incentives that are working throughout the state. We're also going to hear from Denny Costerison, the school business official, on what's happening thus far in the short session. Remember, the short session, a lot of ideas get thrown around, but they won't change too much that costs money. But you still need to pay attention to it because some things that start in the short session they're testing the waters, and we'll see it next year. So that is for the 31st. And then my second request is to attend the Coalition for Public Education rally at the State House. We've been going every year. We do plan to drive down with teachers, and that is on President's Day, so it's a down and back only.
What day is that?
That's the
February
19th.
19th?
There's also an ISTA lobby day coming up on the 27th, but I'll bring that at the next meeting because I didn't know about it till today.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. My next item is to update the board on what's happening with our graduation pathways discussion. And I'm not going to rehash everything, but I do want to share that since the State Board of Ed took action, there has been some legislation put forth in the General Assembly. The one that we're watching most closely is House Bill 1426 from Representative Beatty. The one piece that's a positive is it does seek for Indiana to have one diploma with 4 different types. So we'll still have we used to have 4 different diplomas, but now there'll be an Indiana diploma with a sticker on it. And this does help us align with ESSA. So that will keep from having the Indiana graduation rate drop because ESSA does not recognize all diplomas. Only the diploma that the preponderance of students earn and anything more rigorous. So that would have cut out regular diplomas. Also, this new legislation will provide that we'll get rid of ECAs and adopt a nationally recognized entrance exam. It's a little bit troubling currently because it says the minimum passing score must be approved by the Commission for Higher Ed and may not be lower than the National College Ready benchmark established for that particular exam. So the benchmark is set based on, I think it's a complicated calculation. Mrs. Castaneda may be better at doing it than me, but it has something, they look at how successful students are in passing their courses as a freshman, and then they work backwards and say, in order to earn a B average at our institution, you would need this score. You would have had this score on the ACT or the SAT. That's in a nutshell how it works. So what we're gonna be using as the gateway for the diploma then is college ready, and so, again, it just creates a concern for us that is there a portion of our students who don't wanna go into a CTE program and be a completer in welding or machine shop or auto mechanics, and they don't wanna go to college and score that 1,030 on the SAT, what is gonna be their pathway? So it continues to be a concern. Then we were talking about the locally created pathway, but now it appears that it's been said at least a few times by Representative Beading that those local pathways must at least be as rigorous as the other pathways that are completely spelled out. So the first thing that comes to my mind is the student who goes to a machine shop for a year and says, I don't think I want to pursue this as a career, and then they switch to auto shop. Well, they didn't complete either program, so now they don't qualify for a diploma, and yet that first experiment of that sophomore in high school, where they figured out what they didn't want to do, and that was valuable for that child, they went on to something else, but didn't do enough hours in that. So according to the current rules, there's not much flexibility in that. There's very little guidance on what we do with out-of-state transfers into Indiana in grade 12. They won't fit neatly into any of these categories. Then there's really not a whole lot of discussion regarding students in the core 40 or the general diploma track who don't hit that college benchmark. Additionally, I want to share really quickly what we heard at Ready Northwest Indiana last week. Mr. McDermott, our former principal, who's now at Crown Point, is on the principal advisory committee to implement the pathways, and he shared some information from their last meeting that the meeting began by telling the principals on that committee that no modifications will be made to what the State Board of Ed adopted. So don't try to say, hey, there's not a neat pathway for kids with a learning difference or students with an individual education plan. Don't try to get us to add anything, because this is the document. They said that right out of the gate. They continue to worry about, the CTE pathways, where there's clearly, a shortage of instructors who can teach those courses. And so there's really a capacity issue, and the teacher shortage is probably more significant in those areas than some of our core subjects even. They continue to ask who will pay for additional attempts at the SAT or ACT, if that's gonna be the qualifying exam, and there's no answer to that yet. And then the people on the committee have concerns not just of out-of-state transfers in, but students who may transfer across the state if the locally created pathways are not consistent across the state. What can that do? And then, of course, the one that we've talked about often is, how do we assist ELL students if they come to Indiana late? There's a lot of research out there that suggests it's, total immersion. After about 3 years, a student of normal ability gets up to speed. It's not gonna happen in 12 months. And so, does that mean every ELL student who moves in as a 12th grader it's impossible for them to earn a diploma? And so those are the concerns we have. We're gonna continue to follow this legislation. It sounds like it has some legs, but it's interesting that our concerns continue to be noted and verbalized by people at these meetings, but it's crickets after the big concerns are raised. So we'll continue to follow that, but I just wanted the board to have those notes so they know that it really is the biggest issue facing us right now, and we have to stay on top of it, and we have to continue to see what we can do to help that niche of kids that don't neatly fit in one of the currently defined pathways. Any questions about that? Sure.
I do. When you say that Mr. McDermott is on the principal group, and at that meeting, they were told there would be no changes?
Correct.
And who chaired that?
Steve Yeager, I believe, was the chair of the meeting. There were 3 State Board of Ed members there.
Okay.
And it began by saying, we're here to talk about the smoothest way to implement the plan, not to try to dissect it. And of course, no discussion can take place about implementing without expressing concerns about what happens for the students that don't neatly fit into one of these lanes.
Okay, so there were 3 State Board of Ed members that met with this principal group.
And 7 principals.
So
yes.
that is progress, you're right. And it reminds me, I forgot to say something a little bit earlier, that the education savings account that we talked about so much, about that act, has been kind of just not even brought up for a vote this year. So it appears that even though we get frustrated and we think it doesn't do any good to talk and make phone calls, it, obviously they are paying attention, because the education savings account, and it just kind of like disappeared. And if they're actually meeting on this, that's a good thing. But to come out of the gate and say, we can't make any changes, I mean, what kind of discussion does that have?
Well, and I will just say that when I was down for the Pathways discussion, one of the state board of ed members said it's 5 years till it gets implemented, but we have to start somewhere. That's what was said to us in the hallway. And so it was, the impression I took from that is, there is a chance that it can be modified.
Right.
So, listen, there's no way any educator who is taking the time to drive to Indianapolis to try to figure out what's best for kids is not going to say that there are aspects of this that are not good for kids. And so I'm confident that that will keep being thrown at them. And eventually someone's gonna have to say, either we're not worried about those students in that category, or let's try to figure out a resolution.
Okay. Thanks for the update on that, though, Larry.
Sure.
Because it sounds like it's an ice cube starting to melt away, maybe, huh? Or morph into something different?
So now we're ready for, turn it to Mr. Baxo regarding our referendum resolution.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rocco. Fellow board members, administrators, and guests. At this time, I would like to share a little background on the factors that have brought us to the point where we, as an organization, are ready to ask our community support for the operation of our schools. It is my belief that one mark of the best communities in America is the support we give to our young people as they prepare to go out into the world. As the state of Indiana has changed the way schools receive operational support away from local property taxes, and as the General Assembly has essentially provided only meager increases over the past 10 years or so, it has become increasingly difficult for our administrative team to maintain optimal class size, retain some of our best and brightest young teachers, and to be innovative. It is for these reasons and more that I would like to now read into the record the question that we will be asking our voting public. Be it resolved that this board hereby determines that based on current revenue calculations for the years 2019 through and including 2026, the school corporation will not be able to carry out its public educational duty unless it annually imposes a referendum tax levy of up to, but not to exceed, 17 cents per 100 assessed valuation per year, starting in 2019 through and including 2026, in accordance with Indiana Code 20-46-1 as amended. Be it further resolved that there shall be placed on a ballot to be considered in a referendum of the registered voters residing within the boundaries of the school corporation an election to be held on May 8th, 2018. The following question for the 8.
Okay, I found this on the web for writing within the boundaries of the school corporation, an election to be held on May.
How do I do it?
I did not do that.
I am
No,
so sorry.
That's not the problem, that's not the problem.
No, it was such a nice speech.
Don't press any more buttons.
No kidding, I'm gonna put it away.
So, the following question. For the 8 calendar years immediately following the holding of the referendum, shall the Lake Central School Corporation impose a property tax rate that does not exceed 17 cents on each $100 of assessed valuation, and that is in addition to all other property taxes imposed by the school corporation for the purpose of funding academic and educationally related programs, to manage class sizes and retain teachers. Now, at this time, I will ask for a motion from the board for this referendum, operating referendum resolution.
I would like to recommend that we endorse the motion that our board president has so stipulated at this time.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We do have a second. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. Now, moving on to our assistant superintendent.
Thank you. In Mr. Gandolfi's absence, I would recommend approval of the personnel recommendations that you received, plus the adjustments this evening.
Move to approve.
And I will second that. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
And my second item for Mr. G is to seek approval of the professional leave request that you received in your packet.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any comments or questions on those professional leave requests? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. You'll have to excuse me, but I thought Al was here. I didn't even notice he was not here. Oh, okay. Moving on to our Director of Primary Education, Teresa Schoen.
Thank you. My first item is to seek your approval of the professional leave request that was included in your packet.
Move to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Ms. Suze. Okay, any comments or questions on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. And for my second item and Sarah's first item, we'd like to share some information on the strategic plan curriculum audit that was completed recently. And at your seat, you should have a copy of the elementary and secondary curriculum documents that were created for the curriculum audit. More work has been done on the curriculum since that time, so the copy that you have reflects the latest work that the committees have completed. So I wanted to just refresh your memory on the process that the elementary used to create the units. Each grade level has a math and language arts committee currently, and each building has a representative on that committee. We started our work in the 2014-15 school year by attending some training on the Understanding by Design framework. The Language Arts Committee then began meeting regularly to develop the units that included required and optional lessons, common assessments, and a final CEPA or curriculum embedded performance assessment. We did incorporate science and social studies standards into those units, and the units were then shared and used by all teachers who provided feedback. The committees took that feedback and improved the units, and that's the cycle that we're currently in. We make a revision, it's used by teachers, they provide feedback, and we adjust from there. Some of the units that included science standards were written using the 2010 science standards, so they'll either need to be revised next year or completely rewritten using our new standards. During the 14-15 school year, the math committees did not write units because we knew we were going to be adopting new materials. They did, however, develop common assessments for the textbook that we were using at the time. When we adopted a new textbook, they decided that we wanted to use that curriculum for a year before we decided on what we were going to do with it and what we needed to add and subtract from it. So this year, when we were looking at writing units, the committees decided that all of the information that would go into the UBD unit template was easily found in the textbook, and so putting it into that template would be just repeating work that was already done. They preferred using a scope and sequence format for math, and so that's what we have written with the help of the math coach, and those that document includes common assessments and supplemental lessons that are to be used with each unit. As I shared earlier, many of the units incorporate science and social studies content. We will be adopting new science materials this year, and once we have those materials in place, we will units for social study standards that aren't covered in the language arts units will, be written into units after science is completed. I think Sarah's gonna pick up where I left off.
Yeah.
Anybody have any comments?
Quick question.
Yeah.
This is not very high on the importance scale, but it intrigued me, going through, some of the unit titles. We've got a first grade unit title in math, unit number 6. In math, would you rather be an eagle or a whale? How is that integrated in the math curriculum?
That's actually a data collection, unit, so they, survey kids, would they rather be a whale or an eagle, and then they do graphing and they look at the data.
Okay, interesting. Thank
Yeah.
you, appreciate it.
Why did you say it's not high on the priority scale, Howard? I don't understand when you said that.
Well, it just seemed like I was, from a self-interest standpoint.
Oh.
That's all. Larry's laughing at me.
How about fish notes and fraction notes?
Yeah. Well, these are good. These are first graders that we're looking at, so that's good.
Any other comments or questions for Teresa?
I guess my question would be, we're using the textbook as the curriculum now instead of looking at the curriculum and deciding what resources we want to use?
That is the core of our curriculum, but no, we have added, additional resources, and that's in the scope and sequence document. The, additional supplemental materials that are to be used in that unit.
Anyone else? All right.
So this is the curriculum then, or there's another?
This was the, document that was given, for the curriculum audit. So this is just listing all of the units that we've done.
And so the curriculum is located where? Teachers have it in their classrooms? Is it on our website?
We
Is there-
have it in, each grade level has a folder in the Google Drive, and so all of the units and all of the resources are housed in the Google Drive.
Okay, and is that available on our website to the public?
The units themselves, no.
The
Because it
curriculum, no?
includes the assessments
no,
in there,
no.
and so we wouldn't want to share that with the
Not the
public.
units, but I was thinking more the curriculum actually.
I'm sure we could, add
I think
something
that's
like
good.
this document.
I think that's a good thing to do.
I'm curious, why didn't they do math UBD units again?
Because all of the information, the standards, the essential questions are all housed in the text that we're using, and so it would be redundant to put them into UBD unit. The scope and sequence, the committees liked that format better.
And can we, as board, look at those textbooks and see what that looks like
Sure.
and why it's there instead of in a document form?
Absolutely.
Excellent. I'd like to look at that.
Thank you, Teresa. Our Director of Secondary Education, Sarah Castaneda.
Thank you, and I'll just pick up where Teresa left off. At the secondary level, the committees are very much structured the same way that Teresa described. It's a group of teachers who represent a particular subject at the high school or at the middle school level or grade level. The committees have members at the middle school level from every building, so that way they feel how they have voice and input over the curriculum and instruction that's being developed. The members are selected in partnership with our LCTA, so that way their union members have a voice as well. Department chairs at the secondary level is what's a little bit different than the elementary. Our department chairs sit on the committees. They typically work more closely with the grade level or subject that they teach. However, at the middle school level, for example, we would try to structure it so that there was a department chair on each grade level committee. So that way then when those three leaders came back together with me, we can also have conversations as well. We started with the English language arts units at both the middle and the high school level. They also took part in the UBD training that Teresa spoke about. And so at the high school and middle school level, all of the units are completed, all the CEPAs are completed, and major assessments, which are typically end of course assessments, have been created as well. Those groups continue to meet each year to revise and talk about what worked well and what things need to be improved upon. That includes not just the units where they're detailing out the instruction and the resources, but also the assessments. For example, middle school had been using quarterly assessments, but they have kind of migrated to more of a semester type exam. Our advanced language arts teachers at the middle school actually went this summer for training. the state has started to release some high ability units, and so they've started to pilot some of those. And the people who actually did our high ability audit were a part of that group that went for training this summer, and they spoke of it very highly, which is why they wanted to pilot some of the material. The high school is continuing to work at incorporating complex text alongside its novels, and our language arts department chair at the high school has done an excellent job of removing himself from what he typically teaches, which are upper level courses, and going back down and teaching the 10th grade classes so that you can see what's going on at those grade levels and have conversations having walked a mile in their shoes, which I think is fantastic. For social studies, if you look at the document, the middle and high school social studies committees began work on their curriculum units in 2015-16. Again, all the middle school units have been completed, as well as their end of course semester exams. At this point, they continue to meet to revise those units, as well as their CEPAs. They've also updated their semester assessments. At the high school, because they just have many more subjects and electives, we've made headway on some, but we still have work to do in some areas like world history, AP Human Geography, government and economics. There are some units started, but we haven't quite finalized them, and so we're continuing to work on those this year to shore them up. In math, UBD units were started during the 15-16 school year. We did do training on that format and worked on them during that school year. However, in 2016, towards the end of that school year, what the teachers said was they were just still really struggling with the shift in the standards, the increased rigor, and especially the process standards. And so they asked us if they could kind of pause and maybe revisit the UBD format, because they felt it wasn't the best way to support instruction. And so what they ended up creating was a scope and sequence document, which I can share with you. And in that, they incorporated all the same elements. It has essential questions, it has the standards, it has the learning targets, and then it has academic vocabulary and suggested performance tasks or required performance tasks for each of the lessons that they're teaching. And what we found is that that's actually been a better support for teachers, so that way they're having more math discourse and doing more application within their classrooms. And so the committees felt that those scope and sequence documents were better fit than the UBD units. The middle school scope and sequences have been created for all grade levels and subjects. Revisions did take place this summer on those, and it continued throughout the school year. At the high school, they focused initially on Algebra 1, Geometry, and Geometry Honors. We have also done work on Algebra 2 and Statistics. Under the leadership of our new math department chair, Val Gardner, we are starting to tackle those upper level courses so that everyone is aligned with this new philosophy. In science, we began working on UBD units actually just this summer after adoption. Middle school was the first one to start working on them. That does exclude 5th grade, which waited a year because of the new math standards to adopt, so they're continuing that textbook adoption process this year. The middle school has created their initial units for the first semester, and the CEPAs that go along with them. Of course, there are little things we need to tweak and revise as they've been going along and finding out what works and what doesn't. 6th grade in particular is sort of answering 2 masters right now. The 6th grade iStep as is the old 2010 standards. The new iLearn is going to be the 2014 standards, so we're going to be moving around even some books that they're using as a resource for next year, which I know at some of the schools we had some copies and things being used just because there's only this 1 year that we're in this pickle of trying to finish out 6th grade iStep and then switch to 6th grade iLearn iStep. And so then actually starting next week is when the high school is going to begin on their science UBDs. We're going to start with biology and chemistry, since that's where the bulk of our students are, and then we'll work out from there to the upper level courses and the electives, same thing we've done with some of the other subject areas. Just to kind of summarize what Teresa shared, the curriculum audit feedback that we got from the consultant was that there's a great deal of work that's been accomplished in a short period of time. Our teachers have been wonderful with how much we've asked of them over the course of the past 5 years, starting with really no curriculum to come to where we're at now. And so that's a good thing. That's helped bring some consistency to our district, where we have 3 middle schools and 6 elementary schools that now have developed much greater communication rather than operating in isolation. She did suggest us putting some sort of curriculum dashboard piece on the website, understanding that we can't put everything out there to the public, but just have kind of a small summary of things, and so we'll look at that. She did also suggest trying to put all the curriculum documents in a centralized location. However, when Teresa and I took that back to our committees, they like the Google Drives where the curriculum committee members have the ability to edit in that collaborative format through the Google Docs, but then the rest of the grade level teachers can have access to the K to 4 curriculum documents, the 5 to 8 curriculum documents, and the 9 to 12 curriculum documents. And so we feel that a recommendation of hers was to try to centralize it. That's really not what our people like. And I'll be honest, she was not very well versed in Google Docs and Google Drive, and so I think because it was difficult for her, she felt it might be difficult for the teachers, but they're really fairly comfortable with it at this point, and that's their preference. This consultant recommended that we continue to work on completing the remaining units, on creating or revising those common assessments, and then striving for that end goal, which is once we get to this point where we know that the instruction and the assessments are all aligned, that we, do vertical articulation as well as really start looking at our data. I mean, that's one thing that I think Teresa and I freely admit, looking at that locally created data is lacking in our district because we haven't had those common assessments. So now that we have accomplished as much as we have, it's something we want to really focus on moving forward, and it was her recommendation as well to focus on that.
Take a deep breath.
Any questions for, yes, Howard? Okay.
Sarah, again, I'm gonna pick on an area that intrigued me, as a former social studies teacher. I'm looking at the high school units, and just the total volume of coverage that is listed there, over what time frame are we looking at trying to go through all these units? Unit 1 through 12, and 12 having 5 subsections in 12. Over what period of time are we looking? A year, 2 years?
As a former U.S. history teacher,
Right.
essentially what happens in Indiana is the students get the first half of U.S. history up to the Civil War and
Gotcha,
Reconstruction. in
that's
8th grade.
traditional, right.
And then we have this awful gap from a social studies teacher perspective where they don't get it again until usually their junior year when they
Okay.
take U.S. history or AP U.S. history. So when you see that American Beginnings to 1850, that really is quite a condensed unit where they're just trying to refresh their
I
memory.
would imagine.
And then from there, they're trying to pick up with more modern American history. So,
Okay.
the units, because there's kind of such a change between what's happening in the United States, that's why there's quite a big quantity there.
Mhm.
And then you see them towards the end trying to look at some of the economic areas as well. So it's beefy, for sure.
I would agree.
I do.
Yes, Dr. Malcolm.
I do have a question. First of all, I heard you mention the textbooks, and I think you said that you had a shortage of them or something, you were making copies or?
So, Pearson, which we use at the middle school level, one of the books, because they're consumable, which is nice with the middle school students, because then they can actually rip out the pages, take them home, write directly, and if they want to take notes. One of the topics, because the program was new, was on back order. It happened to be one of the topics that we actually aren't going to use in that grade level for next year. So unfortunately, at some of the schools, they were making paper copies of it. I mean, I did hear from some parents who had concerns. It just unfortunately was the only way we could put a Band-Aid on it, because it was the first topic they needed to cover, and since that's the tested year in 6th grade in particular, it was an issue.
Well, and so that leads me to the question, are students getting access to the online textbooks?
They do.
They do.
Mhm.
So are the consumables online also?
Yes, the consumable textbook is online.
Okay, okay, so that could have been a solution for the problem?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so then my other question would be, you mentioned that there will be some cross-grade discussion happening in the future?
I think what Teresa and I want to prioritize are those transition years. I'm a little spoiled at the secondary level because we have departments and they meet regularly. I think that there is discourse taking
Automatic.
place.
Mhm.
But we lack that 4th to 5th grade and 8th to 9th grade. The AP TIP grant that Sean Bagley had us participating in was a wonderful opportunity to have some vertical conversations, but that was very early on when we didn't have as much done with the curriculum. So it would be nice to reconvene those at some point and get those conversations taking place again.
And I know teachers really enjoy that, they love conversation like that. And then my final question would be, and I'm not sure if I heard you correctly, but I thought I heard you say that you waited till the new textbooks came in so you could write the curriculum, is that what you said?
With the science,
Uh-huh.
we did, but given the quantity of subjects that we're working on, I prioritize language arts and math because those
No,
standards changed over
and-
first. If the textbooks actually kind of fell in line with when the standards changed.
Well, that was gonna be
The
my
ELA and math
question.
standards changed sooner than the science and social
Yeah,
studies.
you know, that was gonna be my question, is it the textbooks that are driving the curriculum, or is the curriculum driving the textbooks?
No, I mean, the textbooks are getting updated as the standards change, and that's the same time at which we're doing this. The one complaint I get from teachers is they understand the textbook is not the curriculum, or we're getting to a better place where they understand that, there's still gonna be things that we have to pull and meet those standards. And so they've really done a great job of saying, this hits it here, but this doesn't, what other resources? And so the Google Docs are what's nice, and that's why with the consultant, we didn't wanna stray from them. People are doing an amazing job of sharing resources in the final section of those UBD units of where they're pulling other materials and activities for students, which is fabulous.
And I'm sure they are. I mean, it's a great group of teachers, there's no doubt about it. I just wanna make sure that our teachers know that there's a curriculum, or the standards, whatever, that guides the instruction versus the textbook. And I have to say to you, I was talking to a new teacher the other day at Science Olympic. No, he was at the evening turnaround dance, or whatever that dance was that night. He was supervising, and he came over from Crown Point, so he's a new teacher to Lake Central. And he's at the high school, and he said, oh my gosh, the difference between Crown Point and Lake Central is phenomenal, because there's such a collaborative sharing. And that's exactly what I experienced 15 years ago when I came over here, you know. So the fact that there's that culture that supports the sharing and the discourse is something that we need to value and continue with. So I wanted to give kudos to everyone, and I bet you know who it was, don't you?
I'm sure they're doing a fine job at Crown Point.
Oh, I'm not saying they're not doing a fine job. That's not my point. It's just a difference. Ooh, can we edit that out?
And I guess with my question, mine kind of goes back to, I'm gonna piggyback on you for a second, is who's choosing these topics? Is it the state that we're following, or are we choosing them out of the textbooks?
The state sets the standards, we're figuring out how best to group them. For example, in science, especially at that 7th and 8th grade level, we have taken several sections of the 7th grade standards and the 8th grade standards and grouped them together more thematically, because that makes better instructional sense. So we are honoring the fact that they have to have these standards over the course of their middle school career, for example, to use that scenario, but we're making sure we're putting them in places that make the most sense for teachers to scaffold and build off of things in a way that's gonna make more sense to students rather than jumping around hodgepodge.
And what research did you guys use that stated that scope and sequence is better than UBD?
We did not do any research on that. The teachers simply said that they freely admitted they were struggling with the shift to the new standards. They felt that the UBD format was not supporting it. They needed something that more explicitly spelled out for them what the day-to-day should look like. And so that's where they came from. I don't think, and I'll just speak for secondary, that we're taking UBD completely off the table, but for right now, speaking with the math coaches and speaking with the teachers on the committees, those documents are helping them move forward more, and that's what I need desperately in math right now. So I would hope that one day down the road, when we've made that shift, we can get everybody on the UBD format, but right now, this is what the teachers said is the best support for them.
And those documents do contain a lot of the information that it's just a different format. You know, they have the standards, the supplemental resources that are to be used, all of the, lists the assessments, so it's not
What
like
about
it's.
instructional strategies? What about alternate?
So, for example,
Approaches.
my 6th grade teachers were really struggling with not doing a large, review unit to start the school year. And so that was causing them to feel very crunched for time. And so when we sat down as our 6th grade committee, they looked at the document with our math coach, Scott King, who's now the middle school math coach, and we all sat together and we discussed what strategies do you need, because you know, what you went through here and used last year didn't drive it home with the kids. You struggled to present it. What can we do better? And so literally in our document, there in some of our notes, call Scott, you know, at this lesson, because that was something they struggled with, and he had a great activity. I observed him the other day doing an activity with, you know, 3-act tasks from Dan Meyer in one of the 8th grade math classes with Mr. Ashby over at Grimmer. And so we're trying to incorporate those outside resources and that math coach into those units even. It's not just that textbook.
And what kind of grading changes have you made with the assessments, with the common assessments? Is everyone grading the same? Is it still all very formatted where here's 1 point, 1 point, 1 point? Are they really looking at what a kid knows with those assessments?
Well, we are trying to look at what a kid knows. For example, that's part of the reason why the English Language Arts Department decided to move away from those quarterly assessments. They felt that it really wasn't getting to what they wanted to see mastery of throughout the course of that grading period. And so they've changed the types of questions that they're asking. They're trying to go more for that higher depth of knowledge level. We continue to have conversations about that. By no means are the documents perfect, but I think that the culture that we're developing, where people are looking for those types of things, is really improving. I mean, even, the example I point out with Ron Frederick coming down into the 9th grade and the 10th grade level, talking about this Rebecca Link Best Summer Novel, to have some meaningful conversation with our students coming off of summer break, and are there ways that we can improve these assessments? At the junior level for summer reading, they had been giving tests. Could we turn that into a project, so it's not who read the book latest to answer the 50 questions that were chosen, it's who really can make meaning out of what that summer reading involved. So those are the types of assessment conversations we're trying to have. Grading policy, I mean, we try to keep the percentages and whatnot as a conversation. We've adjusted that. There have been times they've talked about just having the CEPAs be a standalone, but because we know we are still revising them, I told them I was cautious to do that in case we possibly put together a CEPA that had issues. I didn't want that to negatively impact student grades, and they understood that. So, I mean, those are all part of the dialogue that's taking place.
And I guess my last question would revolve around, does that mean that we're looking at standards-based grading and objectives so that we know kids are learning certain skills, so they're not taking a final exam that says who said this in Romeo and Juliet, but they're truly learning a literacy skill or a reading skill? Do we have that framed out for math and language arts?
So, I mean, there's still gonna be your test questions that are that DOK1 level. I'd be a liar if I told you we're completely doing away with those. I think what we're trying to push is with those curriculum embedded performance tasks, that's where they're being evaluated and judged on things that are actual application, and taking what they've read and bringing in a different piece of literature, doing compare and contrast. At the math level, it's the kids discovering things on their own. I was in a classroom with Mrs. Gardner the other week where they were trying to kind of reverse the theorem instead of just presenting it. The kids were trying to discover it with a GeoGebra lesson that she had put together for one of the teachers. That's the kind of things that we're trying to focus on assessment. I freely admit, not at the point where we're tracking it and using that data the way we want to for mastery learning, but we're trying to move it there.
Excellent. Thank you, ladies.
You're welcome.
One more question?
I heard you say novels, and then that jogged my memory that we had discussion as a board about one of our school board policies, and it had to do with novels, just because we wanted to make sure there was, do you remember that conversation?
Making sure that there were alternatives when people want to opt out of a book that they find offensive.
Yeah, so you might want to talk to Dr. Bracco about that and kind of see what that was about. Okay, all right.
We'll do that.
That's it?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a second and a third item, I apologize.
No.
For my second item, I'd like to seek your approval for the professional leave requests as presented.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
And then for my last item, I'm seeking your approval for the field trip requests as presented.
So moved.
We have a motion, and we have a second. I do have a question about the field trip. I noticed the one going to Washington DC. Do they have, how many chaperones do they usually have on that?
It depends on the number of students who attend.
With them? Okay.
It just varies.
It kind of varies. It's not no ratio of like 7 to 1 or,
The company that
Yeah.
they go through does have recommended ratios, and we do try to abide by that. I know every year, for example, Mrs. Garris recruits different teachers to go
Okay.
with her, but it's just based on how many students.
Okay. Just wondered.
She usually gets sufficient numbers done.
She does, there's a
That's
lot of
good.
people.
Oh, it's Washington DC. I can see wanting to go.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's take a vote on that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Moving on to our Director of Special Education, Becky Carmella.
And my only item tonight is to seek your approval for the professional leave request that was in your packet.
So moved.
We have a motion. And we have a second. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Moving on to our Director of Facilities, Bill Ledger.
Thank you, Mr. Baxel. I just have one item tonight. I wanted to update the board on the water sampling program that we've been participating in. In December, I informed you guys that we had all the official documents for all of our elementary schools and middle schools. And I also received a call that day about the high school pass, but we did not have the official documentation. Well, tonight in your board packet, you got the official letter about the high school, all our fixtures passed. It was delivered to Mr. Begley after the holidays and copied on Dr. Morocco and I. It's also an updated spreadsheet that by December 22nd, we replaced the 15 fixtures that we were going to replace, all the supply lines and fixtures. And by December 27th, we had also removed the 6 fixtures we were going to remove because they were never used. And also, I've got some other good news to share. We also, we have to resample these 15 fixtures we replaced. And because everything went so well with us and the IFA, even though our large size, they were very pleased how their surveys went and the sampling went. They invited us to participate in their pilot program for retesting. So that basically saved us some money again, because they basically, all we have to do is take the samples. They sent us all the bottles labeled and everything. All we have to do is take the samples, and I have to fill out some data sheets for them, but that's fine. And so those samples were taken last week, and we should have those results back in about the next 2 weeks. So everything went really well. I'd like to thank Erica at the IFA. It was very nice to let us participate in this pilot program. But things went very well. It was a lot of coordination and planning because of our size and the times they had to sample and everything. So it went very well. So once we get those final results, I'll bring that back to you, and that will pretty much close out the program.
Excellent, thank you.
Bill, I'd just like to make a short comment. Congratulate everybody involved in this. It's been admittedly a very successful program.
Thank you, Howard. It went very well.
You hear the Chicago news about the CPS having all their problems, but there's a lot more exposure there. So
Yes.
It's heartwarming to hear our positive
Thank
results.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
You know, Bill, and I also wanted to share, and thank you for removing the shovels outside the vestibule area. The history behind that is I was at an event and I had a parent that came up and said, oh, the school that I work at, you won't believe what happened. The shovel was sitting by the door, which the custodians would do that, and a student picked up the shovel and went after another student. And so, when this parent of ours saw the shovel by the vestibule, he said, that is not good. So I shared it with Bill, and obviously you've taken care of it. So thank you for that. And I know it's a small, trivial point, but it really is all about student safety, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Bill. Okay.
Bill, can I add a short comment? It's not on the agenda here, but I don't think it's inappropriate to bring the issue up. From an outside source, I had an individual come to an athletic event that was previously canceled, walked up to the door, and there was really nobody around except one of our doors was propped open with a bucket full of salt at that time. So it gave that individual free access to the school. Just, keep an eye on that, okay?
Okay.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Howard. All right, moving on to our Director of Business Services, Rob James.
Thank you, Mr. Baxo. My first item is to seek your approval for a transfer of textbook rental fees. This is our semi-annual transfer in which we take the portion of textbook rental payments that the parents have made and transfer that money that goes for the general fees, and we move that to the general fund because that's where those expenditures come from, since they're not actually textbooks. So from July 1st through December 31st, we had $211,483.84 of fees collected, and so I seek your approval to transfer that money from the textbook rental fund to the general fund.
Move to approve.
And we have a motion,
Second?
and we have a second. Any comments or questions?
That's not all, is that just the high school?
No, that's district-wide, but again, that's only the fee portion. The students' textbook bills, the textbooks, the consumables, the workbooks, and then the various miscellaneous fees. Could be for agendas, could be for their technology fees. So it's just those miscellaneous fees. It's not the textbooks themselves or the workbooks and consumables. That money's still paid for out of the textbook rental fund.
Thank you.
Great. All right, let's take a vote on that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. My second item is to seek your approval for an extracurricular purchase at the Clark Middle School. The theater department would like to purchase 6 wireless headsets and microphones to be used for performances there in the LGI room. The total cost for the entire system would be $6,261 and will be paid from the Clark Theater Extracurricular Fund. So I seek your approval on that.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. And then I seek your approval on the donations that were listed in your board packet.
We have a motion?
So moved.
Oh, second.
We have a motion, we have a second. It was close. It was close. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. That's all I
Thank you,
have.
Mr. James.
Thank you.
All right, public comments. We have one more public comment this evening. Mary Jean Martin? Mary Jo? Oh, Mary Jo Martin. Sorry about that.
Okay. I have 2 comments. One, I want to thank the board for the support of Science Olympiad. I got roped into this when I first signed up to come here to work, and it was, why don't you consider it? And 3 days later, a note came in and said, congratulations, you're going to be running Science Olympiad. Thank you very much. It was the best decision you ever forced me into. I've become a better teacher because of it. I watched numerous students, and I want you to know now that Lake Central will have a flag on Mars because we have 3 or 4 former students here now working at SpaceX. It is really gratifying that I've never had the honor to work with these young kids, but we stay in touch. The only thing we had was the 4 years together in that classroom working and troubleshooting and doing everything. So we have one student that just graduated from the University of Pennsylvania that is now working at SpaceX. Another one is interning there. And just numerous students at all over the place, just coming from doing STEM education. So allowing these kids to compete and do everything. Thank you very much for the support of the tournament and everything that was going on. Word has spread quickly from what was going on. Mr. Bagley and Mr. Powers, numerous people spoke, and we had 2 or 3 teachers, young teachers from schools in Indianapolis that said that it was amazing and understanding what the kids and what was here and might be looking for jobs moving this direction. So, I mean, that was really neat to hear at the end of the day, that they were very impressed with administration support and what was there and how the kids did. So I thought it'd be something to go on. With all that being said, talking with money, I kind of goofed, and I figured this would be better to hit it here instead of going into Mr. Bagley's office like I did before. With doing the invitational, when I first started to coach Science Olympiad, I had to go hunting. Now people are knocking the door down because of the reputation and because of your graciousness of letting us compete. So last year we went to Wright State University, we applied and we got waitlisted this year. And then with the own invitational, doing everything and not doing the paperwork, I would be asked permission if we could go this weekend back to, this year they're doing it at the high school at Centerville, Ohio, and would be leaving to go compete there. Last year we went now to 60 teams, the kids placed 11th. So, hoping this year to be able to get into the top 10. So I know it's kind of short notice and whatever, but it's this Friday that we would be leaving, and the competition is Saturday with the 66 teams.
At least you're
I need to
asking
see the
before the
details.
fact.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I can't make a recommendation to the
Right.
board without seeing the details of the thing, so fill out the paperwork and get it to Mr. Bagley, and we'll work it through
And I understand.
the proper channels.
Yes, sir.
And if we need to make an exception to our policy, we'll discuss it with the board, but we need to evaluate
I
the
understand.
request first.
Not a problem. Thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Jo.
Thank you, Mary Jo.
Appreciate it.
All right, I believe that's it for our public comments. All right, moving on to our board comments and consideration of future agenda items, and I'll start with Mr. Marshall.
I have nothing further to add this evening. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Malcolm?
Tagging on to what Dr. DeVries said, I noticed in the paper today that Valparaiso is instituting the transitional kindergarten program. And I believe that's one of the cuts we made years ago, so hopefully, if the referendum goes to fruition, that's something we could consider, because the young children coming in today are very needy, as we all know. I wanted to thank Sarah and Teresa for your reports on the curriculum audit, and, you know, with all the work that we've done on the strategic plan and organizing with the community focus groups and your online surveys from your stakeholders, I hope that we can go to the next phase in that strategic plan in the near future. And that's all.
Okay. Ms. Lessing.
All right, I would like to thank Mr. Bakley and the staff and all the volunteers, and Ms. Talon, I know was there. What a phenomenal winter formal that you guys gave our students. It was absolutely wonderful, no incidents whatsoever, just all of our kids and our staff having a really great time. So thank you for that, appreciate that. And then to add on to what Dr. DeVries said so eloquently, when we think about the competitive salaries for teachers and we think about how much they're paying for health care if they want to have a family, things like that, it brings me back to some of the classes that my own kids are taking here that are not offered everywhere in the state, and the software and the facilities that we have here that not everyone gets, one of them being our architecture, and I don't know if I'm using the right, would the project lead the way, would that be Mr. Gray? You know, just having a conversation with Mr. Gray, just as two people, you know, hanging out at the dance, talking, he's in hot demand because there aren't a whole lot of him that are certified in our state, and that's part of the reason I also want to see this referendum passed, because we need to keep teachers like him. We need to be able to give our teachers what they need, and when we train them, keep them here, not let them train to go somewhere else. And I'm sure he would be in hot demand. He's doing a phenomenal job with our kids in the Project Lead the Way and the architecture and the engineering programs that we have. So kudos to the whole staff, Mr. Bakley. You guys are doing a phenomenal job. Thank you for all you do. And Dr. DeVries, thank you for speaking up today. You did a fantastic job saying exactly why we need to move this forward. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Susan?
No comments.
No comments tonight. Okay. And I just, you know, I think I'll have to echo the sentiments also, Ms. Lessing, Dr. DeVries. I couldn't have spoken any more eloquently about that than what you guys have said this evening, so I will leave it at that. And I will pass it over to Dr. Baracco for our board calendar of future activities.
Just forgot I had to say something. Let me open my calendar.
Basketball this
So,
weekend.
Yeah, well, the girls sectional is next Wednesday at Crown Point, 6 p.m. But our next meetings are here on the 5th and the 20th.
Okay.
Yeah.
February 5th and the 20th.
And do we have?
20th is a Tuesday, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Do we have our first gymnastics meet?
Yes,
This week?
Thursday night.
First one.
Here,
Nice. Yes, upstairs. Is that where it is upstairs?
Up in the blue gym.
Up at the-
All right.
Yeah.
Nice.
And you hired some very excellent gymnastic coaches. I was reading their bios in that sports memorabilia book.
They're making good progress, so.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
great.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. Do we have a second?
Second?
We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.